here in the UK, the human rights of everyone living here have been protected and enshrined in law for the past 20 years. Now, we all have the right to life, right to liberty and freedom, the right to a fair trial, and we can't be punished outside of the law. Now, everyone benefits from these rights. No one objects to them. But you also have the right to freedom of thought, religion, and belief. And your rights may clash with other people using their rights to peaceful protest and free speech, and to those who assert their right not to be discriminated against on the grounds of gender, race, disability, sexuality, religion, or age. The truth is that not everyone in the UK is as free as the law suggests when it comes to how they're treated, what opportunities they have, and their freedom to please themselves. Do some communities ignore human rights law? Well, Andrea, you've been a massive campaigner for, I guess, your beliefs as an evangelical Christian and what you think is happening in our society and how you think the drift of society is very much against your beliefs. Just, various human rights legal cases with the Christian Legal Centre, your body, the right to display your faith, helping Christians who wish to express their faith in all circumstances, bed and breakfast owners, praying at work, and also, as you put it, expressing views in favour of traditional parenting. And also, we have had such a rapid pace of societal change in this country, haven't we? Some people, it's been difficult to keep up. For example, equal marriage. And I know you would be against equal marriage, wouldn't you? But so, some would say that by being against equal marriage, sorry, this is the longest question in history, you would be discriminating against gay people.
I think that when we look at our great history in this country, derived going right back to King Alfred, who founded our common law on biblical values, on the Ten Commandments, which looks at the innate dignity of every human being, that served our country extraordinarily well. The Magna Carta...
But the Ten Commandments didn't mention child abuse, and we're much more focused on that now than we ever were before.
This idea of common law, which, with the idea of the protection of the individual, the freedom of every individual, has been rooted at the heart of our laws. And it's ironic in many ways that since the push of a change in system, the Human Rights Act, which really is founded on this idea that there is no other authority apart from our own humanity. There isn't a reference to God and loving our neighbour as ourselves. Jesus' great commandment to really love one another. These are great and beautiful truths. What about, for example, people denying people their nature, two people of the same sex who want to not only love each other but have that love manifest in marriage? This is not about being against any individual, but it's about saying that marriage is a beautiful, God-given ordinance between a man and a woman. And this is something, and for children to be raised within that construct, and that is something that has served society historically, beautifully and wonderfully.
But we move on.
But
society moves on.
Well, interestingly, on Tuesday, we have a case in the Employment Appeal Tribunal where a magistrate who's faithfully served his community for 30 years was not only removed from the magistracy from expressing behind closed doors that he felt that a child does best with a mum and dad, and that should remain with foster carers who wanted him a mother and a father, as opposed to being placed.
What about his human rights, Sharon? That's a very...
on Tuesday, and also, but not just that.
We can't do every single case. That's a very good one.
Same case, because that same person was also removed from the non-executive directorship of a hospital because of his views. That's
Sharon,
an extraordinary
these
thing to
are
occur
human
to
rights being trodden upon in their own way, aren't they?
Well, first of all, I'd say if you actually read the Ten Commandments, you would realise they're pretty much irrelevant for our society. Women are treated as chattel, along with...
Not in the Ten Commandments,
along with
innate dignity.
Most of the Ten Commandments are irrelevant to our society.
So do not covet thy neighbour's ass or...
And his wife, So as my feminism got the better of me. I was brought up in church, and into my late 20s, once you start to think of the world from a feminist point of view, the Christian symbol system kind of unravels before your very eyes, really. So my research is in women priests in the Church of England. Many people would probably believe they are treated equally within that institution, and they're absolutely not. They are legally discriminated against and culturally discriminated against just because they are women.
So is that a breach of their human rights?
In my worldview, it absolutely is, yes. But it's institutionally okay because the Church of England is exempt from equality legislation, of course. So that's where the tension comes between human rights law and the need to practice certain religious beliefs.
So it's a breach of employment law, do you believe?
You would think so, but it isn't in the Church of England.
Sue.
Jesus Christ was the most compassionate person that ever walked this earth. It was him that had, because it's in the Bible, and there was a woman caught in...
Superman was the strongest man who ever lived. It was in a comic book.
But this... the Bible...
It's nothing. Written means nothing.
It's rooted in history, geographical evidence, archaeological evidence...
What about women priests?
Go to the British
The
Museum.
gentleman has made an argument against, we might call it human rights. If it's written down, then it has no authority just because some guy wrote it down. What if some guy wrote down, or some girl, so to speak, wrote down human rights legislation, and human rights legislation in any country can always be repealed by the same processes and people that devise it.
It's one of the people. It was voted by Parliament.
Was how torture was justified in Guantanamo Bay because it was outside the US jurisdiction, and they produced justifications from utilitarianism why it can be used. You can commit some evil to do, quote-unquote, a great amount of good, which has justified most tyranny throughout history.
Aisha Ali Khan.
I would prefer a basis that goes beyond human beings, which can't be changed, rather than one that relies on the capriciousness and mercurial nature of human utility and interest.
But society moves on, and our understanding of human beings and the human condition moves on and changes. And Aisha, you've done a lot of campaigning in this area when it comes to women and women's rights, haven't you?
Absolutely. Yesterday we had an amazing Women's March London, and obviously we've mentioned talking about feminism and how to make sure that women get their rights. Even if those rights are written or they're in the Bible, they've been recorded 1400 years ago, the reality of women and their rights in a real world setting completely different. We've been talking about forced marriages, we've been talking about girls being taken over to countries to have FGM performed on them, we've been talking about homosexual people who are denied the right to exist in lots of countries as well. And then on top of everything else, we've had really high profile cases like Princess Latifah and Rahaf Mohammed, who's in some countries where we do business, massive business, and we basically turn a blind eye because there are billions of pounds of profits to be made. So how do we
safeguard those rights? Some people in these countries, if you look at social media, are actually supporting those regimes in the way that they're treating those people who are fighting for their individual human rights or trying to flee persecution.
We didn't have social media 10, 20 years ago, so what happened then? The only reason we've been able to find out about these cases is because we've had social media tell us about these cases. There are lots and lots of women, there are millions of women who basically will never get a chance to speak out.
What about your own experience of forced marriage?
Well, when I was 13, I found out that I'd been engaged. I don't know when that took place, but I was told this is who you're going to marry. And at the time I was 13, I was visiting relatives in Pakistan, and it was a bit of a shock. But I was very fortunate in that my parents listened to me, and I said no. And I was allowed to later on choose who I wanted to marry. But there are many girls and boys and men as well who are forced into marriage and then forced to stay with partners that they don't want to stay with.
And how easy is divorce when it comes to men and women in Muslim communities? Is there a difference?
A guy can just say talaq, talaq, talaq 3 times, often in a fit of anger. Yeah, in a fit of anger they can say and they're done. For women, if they want to get divorced, they have to go through a laborious process. Often the men withhold the divorce simply because they want the woman to basically go through a Sharia council or go through family to put pressure on the guy. It's very unfair, and often what happens is the men have moved on, they've got married, remarried, they have children, they have families, and the woman is still stuck trying to get her
Salma, how can
Islamic
that be fair?
divorce.
How can that be? For example.
Well, I can actually speak from personal experience on this sad topic. I have been through a divorce, both religious and civil, and it's simply not true. Of course, there may well be individual cases where there have been difficulties, but Islam gives both men and women the right to divorce. And where there's difficulties, actually it's the Bible which doesn't allow divorce, and we see sad cases in Judaism where it's the get literally the man is the only one who can give that divorce. In Islam, it's not like that.
I think it's wrong to completely say it happens.
Aisha, wait a minute. Aisha.
I have gone with women to Sharia councils in Dewsbury and Manchester and London and advocated on their behalf because they can't afford lawyers. Some of these women are from Pakistan and Bangladesh and India, and they don't have the language skills. They've been traumatised. They've been emotionally traumatised by their experiences, and they don't know how to express themselves.
So
and they come up against a panel of men.
The issue about divorce is across the board. I mean, we've had this recent case, and I was so shocked. Tinny Owens, married for 40 years, the Supreme Court in this country said she's not allowed to divorce. I mean, it's crazy. So these issues are across the board, and of course, nobody should be forced to get married. Nobody should be forced to get married, and nobody should be forced to stay in a marriage.
On the subject of divorce, some people in the church do not recognise people who are divorced and married the second time in the Christian church. They don't recognise those marriages.
I think what's
do you, if somebody's divorced, do you recognise their second marriage?
I think that what we've got to look at in this debate that we've just... No, I'm going to answer the question. But
well, answer it quickly, because there are lots of people to get into. That's a specific question.
We can see here, can we not, that there is a difference between different worldviews and actually how a society works itself out. So, as we've just heard, within Islamic law, under Sharia law and under Islamic marriage, the woman has very little access to justice and to...
That's not true.
This is why we have been dealing...
Well, in a minute, let's hear from the women who are talking.
It is real situations.
Salma's perfectly incapable of answering this question herself, and I will come to you.
And we have been dealing with, also with a young woman who was groomed by an Islamic gang. It's a very sad case, and there are many of them from Bradford and Rotherham and other towns up and down this country.
Islamic gang?
What makes them Islamic?
She was raped. It's been all over the newspapers.
That goes against Islam. So why are you saying Islamic gang?
Because she was forced.
Shall I say,
she was forced to use
in that Central African Republic, that there are Christian gangs going around killing Muslims?
I do want to.
Cannibalism.
That is in fact. Listen, that particular issue is a debate that we were one of the first programmes actually to have that particular debate. More and more people are talking about it, but the terms are very, very loaded. I think you have to be very careful.
That wasn't Christian of you, was it? Well, not from the Christians that I know.
Maybe medieval, but anyway.
But anyway, just quickly, answer, Andrea, please. Just answer the question. If somebody is divorced, would you recognise their second marriage?
Jesus permitted divorce in one situation only, which was where there was adultery.
This is why we need universal human rights. This is exactly the problem, where someone has this meta world view that, you know, that there's these laws that I believe in and they're more important than anything, any kind of individual human choice. But when you've got competing meta views, this is exactly why it came out. And I don't agree with the point that the British Empire was always great, and, you know, if that's true, why would we have to make the decision in 1948 to have these universal declarations of human rights?
What's it like?
It wasn't working.
We're taking lots of sidetracks here, and I'm going to put us right on the road of this debate. What about gay people in, for example, religious communities like the one that you came from, but adhere to no more?
Sure, exactly. And you know, what happens in religious communities is people go, well, there's these social roles that come from religious tradition or cultural tradition. They're more important than your individual right as a human being. And as a world, we have to decide whether it's okay for a person to choose to be gay. I think, generally speaking,
nobody chooses.
Well, to choose to come out as gay, and to live your life that way. But the thing is that, as a world, I think we're moving to the point where we realise, actually, that's a bit crazy what's been happening to people who are LGBT. So now we're coming to a head where religious traditions are coming against that kind of human right choice, and they're fighting internally as well. So some religious people disagree with each other. And so it comes back to the point where you need universal human rights that go over religious tradition.
Who defines
I will be with you in 1 second. I know that you have... Well, you'll have a chance, because I'm going to come and speak to you in just a second.
A lot of claims against certain communities. At least
you will have a chance, but I want to speak to you in a couple of seconds, because I want to speak to the audience first of all, and then I'm going to have a little conversation with you, Abdullah. What would you like to say? Me too. Yeah.
I think it's super important for people to recognise that there is a difference between culture and religion.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about culture here as well. That's our question. You know, some communities ignoring human rights law. It could be religion, it could be culture, and we've touched on quite a few different cultural groups in this country. But carry on. Yeah.
Right, and there's many, many, many different cultures within each religion. So there's no point looking at a culture and trying to generalise that to a religion and saying that's what the religion believes. At the end of the day, you need to be educated in the religion you're talking about when it comes to trying to talk about different cultures as well.
And gentleman at the back there with the beard, yeah. There's the microphone, it's there.
Yeah, so the Human Rights Act was democratically put through our parliament by the people we voted for as our representatives. Okay? The problem we've got here, not even 10 minutes into this debate, we've got people representing different religions, which are obviously, these religions are part of different cultures, arguing with each other and instantly saying, actually, this religion does this religion does this, when realistically, the majority of the country, otherwise there would be uproar against the Human Rights Act, are for the laws that we have now. And I think it's time for some cultures to start moving forward at a quicker pace and catch back up.
But things have changed, yeah. Things are changing in our country at such a dizzying pace. I mean, the Wolfenden Commission in the 50s, homosexuality being made legal in 1967, and now we have equal marriage. In the great scheme of geological time, that's quite quick, and some cultures cannot keep up with that. That's the thing. But Abdullah, let me ask you this, because on the subject of LGBT rights, for example, we've had huge strides recently and advances in understanding trans rights and, you know, recognition of non-binary people. Do you think it's a matter of time before we have, I don't know, you know, that's more accepted? We have a, I don't know, a non-binary imam.
Well, I first want to kind of answer the general question and in relation to what you just asked me, which is basically, do certain communities have problems with human rights? Well, the law is established, the law of the land, so everyone has to obey the law. That's not really an issue. So all your campaigning is for nothing because the law is already established as it is, whereby forced marriage is illegal.
You need to see the reality
let me
on
finish.
the ground.
Let me respond to you.
You need to
engage with time.
Wait.
I have only limited time, so let me respond to you.
One love.
All right. All right.
Some chance.
All right, so to respond, in both classical Islamic law as well as English law, no one can be forced to marriage. It gets instantly annulled in Islamic law. So it's not like, oh, a woman is forced to marry, then she has to spend a laborious process. It's not really actually that laborious process.
It actually is.
No, it isn't.
Have you been through a divorce? Have you been through a divorce?
There was a report commissioned by the Ministry of Justice.
There's a bit of mansplaining going on here,
yes,
I think.
Of course it is.
No.
A bit of mansplaining? Anyone?
No, it's called human-splaining. Don't look at the world through that lens, for a gendered lens, Nicky. We're all humans, right? All equal, yeah?
Okay.
So if I may just respond to her points, right? So basically, in Islam, women do have the right to initiate divorce, but, and the case was mentioned by my colleague Salma, which is that in the law of England and Wales, if a woman is in an unhappy marriage, that is not grounds for divorce, which is what the Supreme Court in this country. So a woman in an unhappy marriage does not have the right to divorce
unreasonable behaviour.
according to the law of England and Wales. But according to Islamic law,
you do have the
if
right,
a woman
but you
is
can't
unhappy,
get into
she can divorce.
Are you going
so
to
Islamic
answer?
law,
You're
Islamic
telling
law
me.
gives
Be
more
quiet,
rights.
everyone. There's too much.
Gives more rights.
There's too much.
So why don't you direct your attention to
There's too much shouting going on.
and not to...
There's no need to shout.
No, she's shouting on me.
Punch in my hand. There's no need to shout.
No, I'm trying to make my point.
Calm down. It's fine. I'm calm. It's fine.
Yeah.
Are you calm?
But
are you calm?
Are you going to ask her why she's shouting, though?
I want to ask the question that I asked you before. Ask why she's shouting. We're not in the playground.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So please maintain order.
Okay, I'm trying to maintain order. That's why I've reached my hand across. What's the situation
Will I not be interrupted any further?
Well, if you answer the question. If you don't answer the question, I'll interrupt you.
that
That's the deal. What are the situations? Let me ask you the question. Trans rights in Islam. What are trans rights in Islam? Do you think there will ever be a time that they're accepted? Non-binary and trans people.
What do you mean by trans rights?
What do you mean, what do I mean by trans rights?
I mean, we're discussing human rights, right? The rights of all human beings.
Specifically, we can discuss gay rights, we can discuss women's rights, we can discuss trans rights, and then it's a specific aspect of human rights.
In Islamic law, it does not discriminate...
What are people who want to change their gender? What about their rights in Islam? Do you respect their rights?
Nicky, in Islamic law, there is no category or discrimination for people based on sexual proclivity or taste, or this, whatever you want to discuss further than that. We don't divide people up into those categories in the first place.
Sharon, it's important that people can define themselves because they feel that they have been hitherto oppressed. So people define themselves as such and feel discriminated against because they are in one of those categories in religions. Not just your religion, many religions.
Yes, certainly in Christianity, which is the only thing I can speak about with any knowledge. There is a cultural and an institutional for the Church of England prejudice against anybody who's not heterosexual, and if you're having sex outside marriage, officially that's not countenanced either. It's for the procreation of children within heterosexual marriage. So anybody outside that, I'm being very, very general, so the caveat is not everybody believes the same thing, but outside that, institutionally, you are problematised. Now, in the Church of England, they do ordain trans people. It's not a category that is overtly discriminated against. However, it's the sexuality aspect of people's identity that is very problematic within the Christian symbol system. And it's been well publicised. There was a tragedy in Didsbury where a young teenage girl took her own life because she came out as gay, and it didn't sit well with her Christian belief. That church in Didsbury had to, and did willingly, completely transform its attitude to the gay and lesbian community.
So often the case, isn't it, that discrimination melts away when you see the human face of somebody.
And the problem is with the Christian symbol system, it's very fixed, and so people genuinely want to be open and kind and accepting, but then they're anchored in a set of symbols that are like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years old.
Yeah. Do you believe, Imtiaz in just a second, do you believe, Aisha, that in the communities that you understand, from where you come, understanding is getting better of these issues, and specifically things are getting better for women?
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I quite enjoyed the silence there for a second. Do you think, Aisha, sorry, are things getting better for women, do you think?
I think the more we speak out, the more we're allowed to speak out and not drowned out by the voices of men who then accuse us of shouting at them. I think definitely the issues are getting better. And also I think there's a real movement now, and different people are coming together. This morning I've had to literally spend 2 hours on Twitter combating transphobic comments, because we had Mona Bergdorf, one of our speakers yesterday on stage, with a lot of people accusing us of, you know, why have we got somebody like her opening our rally yesterday? But understanding comes from a place of acceptance and a place of tolerance. And if we do not have those qualities in the first place, then we're never going to move forward as a society and embrace everybody from all religious backgrounds and all cultural backgrounds as well.
Well, of course, in America, the Women's March has been led by somebody who's praised Louis Farrakhan.
And we are against anti-Semitism, by the way.
Gentleman at the back, yeah, with the glasses. Hi.
Yeah, I don't think any culture is ignoring the Human Rights Act. Why? Because the Human Rights itself clearly states that culture is not static but dynamic. So if any culture is currently ignoring something we perceive to be, what we should do, we should be nudging them and telling them, come on, tag along. And
you can't drag people into the, if some might put it, into the 21st century kicking and screaming,
no,
because they will retrench into their own conservatism.
You can educate them. They can be educated.
Yeah, but they will then, you know, rail against that, potentially. That's the problem, they feel that they're being lectured at. Yeah, white shirt.
What was the question? Sorry.
I thought you wanted to come in.
I didn't have my hand up.
No, I thought you had your hand up earlier on.
But no, I think, you know, we've got, I can speak in my own religion, Judaism, we've got a huge range of different types, from liberal Judaism, where you very much could have a gay woman as a rabbi, and that would be fully accepted.
To Orthodox, right across.
To Orthodox and to more religious Haredi communities, where there's probably very few individual rights in a lot of communities. But I think that shows that it's not necessarily the religion, it's always how it's being interpreted. And I don't think in religion itself, you know, I don't think that goes against human rights.
OK, Salma. I mean, some people, there's this old argument we've had many times about tolerating the intolerant and tolerating the intolerable. But is there, do you think, in our complicated country, with our complicated, contrasting set of beliefs, or no belief, do you think there is an overarching, broad set of principles that we can sign up to so we can all rub along together?
I think we have. And speaking as somebody who is proud, non-apologetic about Muslim, I'm a visible Muslim, I actually cherish the Human Rights Act. And I think a live and let live attitude is both a morally superior as well as a very pragmatic and practical. And no, hold on. Can I just finish?
Equality is a natural right.
Yeah, but how
every
people
single
define
individual have the right to expect that.
Yeah.
It should not be shrouded in any spiritual understanding.
Does Andrew have the right to stand up and say that she does not approve of homosexuals? That's her right as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
See how we practice it.
But they must be governed by the civil code.
Yes.
The civil code of conduct.
Salma, so wait a minute, everyone. We've only got like 40 seconds for your final point, but I know you'll do it beautifully.
We never got a chance to
So
talk.
I'm sorry about that.
Having laws which protect everybody's freedom to live how they want to live.
They have to be anchored in something.
No, it's up to them what they anchor it in. It's up
Otherwise
to them.
there's chaos, and we have chaos.
No,
What about the antipathy of those who convert
what
to Islam?
allows
How their families,
what's allowed
how their
us...
families, how their families.
No, no.
What's allowed
Do you know what I'm
us
going to do, ladies and gentlemen?
today-
I'm going to take back control. Take back control.
Good luck with that.
Listen, we're not going to get anywhere in 20 seconds. We try. Yeah, everybody that I could get to had a say, and there were lots of people that wanted to have a say. So sorry I didn't get you. Thank you very, very much for watching. As always, the debates will continue online and on Twitter. Little oasis of calm now. Next week we're in Salford, our new time of 11:30. Do join us then. But from now, it's your absolute right to have a great Sunday, and I will support it.